regulations between the two administrations. If you care to read them, I can make you a copy, or you all can have
Very
them.
sweet. Some bedtime reading for us later.
Yes, so I know that's very exciting, but sometimes I'm asked, what's the
We
difference?
actually will take a copy.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I thought you might like it. So what I have done in this particular draft is, and I'm sorry for all the different colors, but I just like, since we've been over the substance of it, what I would just like to do is go through it. The red changes is the language that is inserted from the go-by from the New Hampshire School Board Association. If the black language is what is in there from our 2020 original version, okay? If that was changed for any reason from what is being recommended by the school board, then I inserted red language, put that in there so you all could see the total changes that are being made. Yellow highlights for sections and a couple words are my just little scribbles saying, I think we should go this way. And there's even a light green in there that I apologize for because I was headed for yellow, but somehow I got green instead. So just
Can
realize,
we ignore the green?
please.
Yeah,
I-
sorry, you guys.
So-
I
Oh,
that's
saw
right.
it too, and I thought, what's the green?
So just
now?
ignore that. And Cara,
I may not have any.
you should have a couple like on
We'll see.
page
Yeah.
14.
Okay.
I mean, they're just little words like the outside resources for sexual harassment support. If we even keep that section, the first couple were,
Gotcha.
yeah, instead of being in black, were highlighted in green. That's my bust. And then in advance, I just want to let you know, this has not been formally formatted. Bridget and I sat down and tried to, and we got through it a long way, but then we started getting into some subsections and little Roman numeral 1s and 2s, and we said, you know what, it's a first draft. If you don't mind, Cara, I'd like to defer to your expertise on that.
Absolutely.
So, starting out, if I could, on page 1, the purpose is pretty much the same between the 2020 version and what's been recommended. The red, of course, is the new language. The first change that they recommend, starting with this policy and grievance procedure, applies on the first page. I recommend we get rid of that very last sentence, both in the second to last paragraph under purpose, and do the same thing and actually eliminate the last section paragraph, because all they do is tell you where you can find other information within the policy.
Mm-hmm.
We don't normally do that. I didn't find it particularly helpful, but that's a recommendation to you, and I didn't want to eliminate it without your permission.
So you were saying, just for clarification, in the red paragraphs on page 1, the first paragraph, you would like to eliminate the sentence definitions through policy. And then in the second paragraph, you would like to basically scratch that whole
Correct.
section.
Yes. So,
Yeah. And I think we went through this in the last round as well, because we had a similar issue.
yeah, there's a lot of redundancy, and I think, in good faith to try and send people in other places, we just don't need it. You get there eventually on your own.
All right, I will mark it, and then we'll open it up to discussion once we've gone through it. And Pam and Liz, feel free to jump in if you have questions before we move on.
Yeah.
It's kind of an open forum.
Please.
I will say, I'm noticing in the first paragraph in the red, we have in parentheses Title IX sexual harassment and in parentheses non-Title IX sexual harassment. Are they both defined terms?
Where are you? I'm sorry.
In the first red paragraph.
Right here. Title IX sexual harassment, and then, go ahead.
I just see that there's two parens, one that notes Title IX sexual harassment, one that notes non-Title IX sexual harassment.
Correct.
One is not in quotes and one is in quotes.
Right, because I think the reason they put it in quotes, and that comes right from their go-by, is because there's sexual harassment that if it meets the criteria and is supported by it, there are different things within Title IX that you have to prove. Or we use other policies that we have in the district, our favorite 161.1, and believe it or not, we have 414. So, but they are both defined terms, Cara.
Okay.
Yes,
And I'm going to go ahead and put quotes
instead of
around
parentheses.
Title IX sexual harassment.
Okay.
Just for now. Okay, thank you.
Okay, yep. The rest of the changes just on page 1 are simple. We don't say school board policy. We technically just go in our policies and go right to board policy under Roman numeral 1. I thought, among others, again, those are scratch outs on my piece, thinking they're a little wordy, but again, wanted you to see that they were included. So if anybody disagrees,
Okay.
Okay. Moving on, let me know if I go too fast, to page 2. And obviously what's scratched out under Roman numeral 1 thereafter is old language that we just took out because it wasn't included in the new one, and I didn't think there was a basis for keeping it. Okay. Section number 2, the definitions and other provisions applicable to sexual harassment. That first number 1 under paragraph 2 is their definition. And what they did is they go in, and we did too, but we did it later on in our original policy, and they give you specific types of behavior that might constitute sexual harassment. And so A through D were included in, and E to some extent were included in our original 2020 version, all the way through F, and G was added. That additional language was added, and then there was no H, the teasing or name calling or sexual characteristics. So I removed that one. But if you take a look, you can see those same A through G in the policy itself that New Hampshire School Board recommends, and they're on page 23.
So, the language of G, we're defining what sexual harassment is. So it's verbal harassment, harassing, suggestive, but then touching or gripping. But then we sort of have this whole other idea about touching or groping. And I just guess I'm questioning whether that really fits in the sexual harassment, or whether it needs a parentheses. That it's not a definition. It's like, you are never allowed to do this, which is
Well,
true
it's not
and
to
good.
I'm sorry, it's not meant to be a definition, it's meant to be an example of something that could constitute sexual harassment.
But then you don't need the rest of that paragraph. Like touching, if it's just the definite,
She's saying you don't need
the example,
the rest
then going into touching and groping will always constitute. That's not a definition. That's not part of the definition.
Right.
And if you continue it from the actual beginning of the sentence, which is in Pred 1, behaviors that often
Yes.
constitute prohibited sexual harassment include
Just saying you don't need
touching of a sexual nature or groping. That's the natural formation of that sentence.
Yeah.
So I think Pam's point is that it just sort of continues on to naming a prohibited activity underneath an example setting. So
That's fine.
I think
Yep, that's fine. That's in red, so that's their go-by, their
Right.
recommendation,
so. We can certainly come back and discuss, but I think I would agree with Pam that it should probably just end with touching of a sexual nature.
And maybe that idea that that's always prohibited belongs somewhere else. Just
Right,
not
so we'll
necessarily.
just check on
Well, I
it.
think it does
It's
by
also-
the mere virtue of number 1, which says prohibited sexual harassment,
Yeah.
and lists them. So you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's-
you're right.
But there's also without consent. So even if it's that's the other piece of it.
Oh, I see what you're saying, because you would like to note that sexual touching or groping, even if consensual, is a violation of school policy?
Well, if it's without consent.
So then you can just say touching of a sexual nature or groping
Without
Without consent.
Yep.
Yeah, that's fine.
Although then I think
But,
Although
okay,
there's
here's the other.
instances that you can have consent.
Boy,
No. Here's where it gets more complicated. A student never can consent to be groped by a faculty member, ever. It doesn't matter about the age.
But that's
And I think that's
covered.
why they put it in there.
That
Yeah.
is covered extensively elsewhere.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I do think that we are covered. I mean, but I do agree that I think because of the ambiguity and because we're really just listing examples of
Yeah.
what could be, of what could constitute, I think we're fine with touching of a sexual nature or groping, period.
Okay.
Because to Pam's point, it's not a definition explicitly.
Also in that one, sexual harassment as a form of sex discrimination is strictly prohibited, and I would just get rid of by the district and make that a period.
Where are you,
Where are we?
Pam? I'm
Back
sorry.
to Pren 1.
The first
Oh,
sentence.
the first sentence, okay.
Okay.
Prohibited, yeah.
Perfect. Okay. All right. moving on then under the next paragraph, starting with such behaviors, which is number 2, I just went ahead and added in their language and then tailored it to our board policies, which would be the 161 and which is the other kinds of discrimination, and 539, which is our bullying policy. And then I recommend again after the listing of the RSA statutes that we end the paragraph after A:27, because again it goes on, you know, and it's directive as to if you go to the definition, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Okay. I can tell you, but I've written them in here if you're interested. But number 3, again, all new language. I did include where it says sections and it has the paragraphs. I put in the Roman numerals that now apply, but if it's okay with you all, I'd like to leave them. I have them, but I have a feeling they may change.
Yeah,
so,
that's totally fine.
And then at the end of that paragraph, under 2, section 2, that goes on to page 3, at the end of the paragraph in red, I added process in accordance with board. It should be board policies 161.1, comma 414 or 539. Okay.
One more time, Karen. 161.1 I have.
161.1,
Yeah.
okay, and 414,
Okay.
which is our other
Right.
sexual harassment policy,
Right.
not Title IX, or 539, which is our bullying.
Bullying, okay.
Oh, I see. You're in the middle of paragraph
Yeah.
2. Yeah.
Just for consistency's sake, the second sentence on the top of page 3, you abbreviate section, and we write it out in most of the other instances I've seen so far, so we
Yep.
should have one way of doing it.
Yep.
I don't.
Yeah,
And you'd
I
like
think-
it all written out,
I
Care
think,
which
smaller?
one
I
it
think
is.
it'll
That's what we did in
always
other
go to
places.
the full word section. I think that's just there's a little bit of like federal law that drops in here,
Yeah.
and they abbreviate things.
I think because if it's coming right from the New Hampshire School Board
It is,
Association,
but we
it's
can
a
do what we
sect.
want.
Yeah, no,
They
I'm
go
just
sec, but-
flagging it.
So do you want it all small, or do you want it a capital S and spell it out?
Let's look for context, but I think it's
Well, in
always
the
a
other
full
ones you
word
had
and
capital
capitalized.
S.
Yeah,
Yep,
and
So
then
it's-
yeah, so capital section fully spelled out. I
Okay.
think is a good
Yep.
like a good rule.
fully spelled.
And then I know we've gone back and forth about this, so I wanted to get the last time we've talked about it, we were gonna do board policy number or policy number.
Right, I think we're mostly I've consistently tried to do board policy.
Board policy?
Yeah,
Okay.
I
so-
did at the end there.
So what, and
Did I miss
how
one?
about, but not, so I just wanna make sure we're not doing school board policy, but
Just-
we are doing board policy.
Correct,
So anytime we see the word policy, we're gonna add board.
board,
Okay.
yep,
Great.
yep. Okay, the other are small changes under 3, 1 through 4, I mean, so if those are okay. Section 4 definitions, all of them, okay, the first 2, actual knowledge and complainant, consent, which is in here, it was in our version, it was not in the New Hampshire School Board, but I added it. I think it's very important when we're talking about without consent, okay, so they know what it is. Dating violence was added in our 2020. All the others, down to, then you go to domestic violence, even though it's a form of sexual harassment, they didn't define it, but we did in the 2020 version, and I think we should leave it. That's my recommendation. We talk about educational programs or activities, and that's number 9. So I just am pointing those out. They are consistent in that they've been there before, but they're not in New Hampshire School Board, nor is 11, which defines what a recipient is. Because you have your complainant,
Right.
your respondent, and your recipient. Sorry, there's so many.
No, it's okay. And we actually went back and forth in the last time we discussed this around whether or not we should use recipient, because after we defined it, I think we only used it like once in
Right.
the entire policy. So something to keep an eye out for. I'm not going to necessarily belabor the point this time around, but
Okay. The other one is that we included is retaliation, which is a biggie, and we left that in there.
Needs a quote?
Open quote.
Yep.
Yep. It didn't get an open quote on the front end.
Yep.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. Moving down to the very bottom of the page, they do sexual harassment under 15, and then they divide up sexual harassment into the Title IX that you were asking about, Cara, and then the non-Title IX. So I only point that out because that's where Bridget and I started really banging our heads, like, how do we format this? So, and I added under Title IX sexual harassment, that where it says school district and I crossed out school, you need to put a district employee conditioning and aid benefit or service. Didn't make it in there.
Where are
We're
you?
going to slow
I'm
you
at
down
the
a little
very
bit because this
bottom.
one's a thick one. So we're currently discussing Title IX sexual harassment as a
Yeah.
defined term, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
If you go to the last sentence on the page where I crossed out school district,
On page 5.
okay.
yeah, it should just say a before, instead of school.
Oh, yep. So a district employee
Correct.
conditioning and aid benefit for service of an education program or activity. And then you've gotten rid of the word quid pro quo.
Correct. They don't use it in the new, that's a
Oh, they
term
took
I
out
use when
quid
I,
pro quo?
they don't, correct, they didn't take it out. They didn't put
Oh,
it
they
in,
didn't
I
put
put
it
it
in.
in our original one.
Yeah.
Quid pro quo, hostile work environment, and then the enumerated offenses. So, they did put in, obviously, the sexual assault, dating, violence, domestic violence, or stalking. Those are your state or federal laws that apply under Title IX. So I included those. Number 3,
Stalking is not listed. These are all defined terms.
Sexual assault, dating,
Violence,
violence,
domestic
Yes.
violence, or stalking as
Yes.
defined in state or federal law.
Stalking isn't capitalized, but the others are. Is that on purpose, or is that?
no, that was just, let me see if
Stalking is defined.
stalking is defined, so it should be probably
Capital.
capitalized. Yep,
The
I
rest
missed
of them
that one.
makes sense.
Yep, and stalking should be too, because it is a defined term. So, so then number 3, which is, mine's numbered, the paragraph starting unwelcome sex-based. Are you all with me? The number 3 paragraph on the, this is one of the big differences between the 2020 and the 2024 is under 2020, you have to have conduct is determined by a reasonable person. It has to be severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive. So they put in the red language. In our original edition 2020, we further defined severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive. So those are included right there in that same paragraph. They're not really defined terms under the definitions, but they're spoken to as part of the element. So I did further define them. If you think it, makes it a little friendlier, but
So my concern about the definitions of severe, is rape? I mean, we're describing rape here. So is this like that? Is that the standard under the law that sexual harassment has to? If it has to be all 3 of these things, it has to be rape. Is that like the only? It just seems
The
so
benchmark is so high.
sets the bar so high that people maybe think that they don't qualify and may not report. And there are certainly things that I would consider severe that are not that don't
they're
meet
not to
that
that
bar.
level.
yeah.
That are not at that level.
I agree.
And so I have I worry about that being our definition when you're saying you have to meet all 3 of these standards, and and it looks like that standard leaves out a lot that I would consider sexual harassment.
No, severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive, the language is included in the go by, it's just not defined.
Yeah.
So where did this language come from?
From our original 2020 version.
So the board, or at the time the New Hampshire School Board Association, or state law, like at some point someone recommended these as examples of.
Correct.
What is considered severe,
They were
pervasive?
further defined within it, yes.
Okay, so I think that it sounds like maybe more modern thinking that there's a much more broad spectrum of what could be considered severe,
Was it
pervasive.
always that you had to meet all 3?
In 2020, yes, it was a much higher burden. The Biden administration lessened it. They said
Okay.
or, you
Okay.
didn't have, but now we're back to all 3.
Okay, well.
That was a huge piece of it. This was a big deal.
This is not a friendly victim edition.
No.
As
Right.
friendly as
I did not
2024
expect
would
it
have
to
been.
be.
But 2020 was vacated.
So let me ask this, and we don't have to decide this today, but let me ask the board members, do you think that it is worthy of our time to leave these in, but broaden what we consider to be examples of or conditions for severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive, and essentially rewrite it for what we feel is appropriate? Or do we think it's not necessary and we could eliminate it entirely?
I would eliminate it entirely, I think, because I think when you deal with examples like that in cases like this, then it leaves people out that may be, with the sort of the famous quote about obscenity, right? When you see it, like, I want people to be able to bring these cases and make the case that it was severe,
That it was those, right, so they get to decide.
and then there's a process
Make the
beyond
claim.
that, but
Yep.
I also think, I agree with Pam, I also think it protects you, because remember, this is what will be used in a court, and so if you have it like that, then you're gonna be compelled, right, to prove that piece, and by being not as tight examples, I think you're in better places. I worry
true,
about
right?
that.
Yeah, if we dismissed an employee
Right.
for this, then they could say, but
But
it
what-
doesn't meet your definition.
Exactly.
Your own policy criteria.
Exactly.
All right, Liz, are you good?
Yes,
If we
I
were
agree with
to,
that.
so in terms of getting rid of this language, we just need to remember to strike it, not delete it. But I think that we are in agreement that it should come out.
But look at the note ahead, they put in there, because they said conduct that meets some but not all of the elements of sexual harassment will not be Title IX sexual harassment, but may constitute other non-Title IX.
But this is our definition of Title IX sexual harassment.
Yeah.
And I think there are things that are severe sexual harassment that may not be rape or may not even be physical contact. I mean, sexual harassment is not always
it's not just
sexual.
touching, right.
Is not always sexual assault or sexual touching.
Right.
You could have severe sexual harassment that doesn't involve any bodily contact whatsoever. So,
Well, that's where we see the when social media is used inappropriately, and there's that emotional
yeah.
impact that it has that isn't touching or anything
Yep.
else. So it has the elements of the same damage.
Okay. All right.
And actually, can we go back to the red? So the red language is what is being suggested by NHSBA to add as a note? Or is this your note?
Hang on a second, let me look at it exactly here, under Title IX sexual harassment.
It's in it just like that?
is Right here, let's
From
see.
what I see.
Okay.
This standard requires consideration of
School
all the facts and
district.
circumstances, including but not limited to the ages and disability statuses of the harasser and victim and the number of individuals involved and their authority.
Yeah, no, it's from there.
Note, conduct that meets some but not all elements of this type of sexual harassment would not be Title IX sexual harassment, but may nonetheless constitute non-Title IX sexual harassment.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's verbatim, except for nonetheless.
And I would say, if we could, consider changing the terms harasser and victim to complainant and respondent, just to be consistent with
With
our
our
language.
definitions, yeah.
That makes sense.
And then I'm good with the rest of it. I just wasn't sure if that was a KFA special.
Nope.
Or if it came from the School Board Association. I'm more inclined to accept a
Complaint.
KFA edition.
Before we move on, if we could go back to the definition of consent
Yep.
on page 4. You made a very important point earlier that I think we should have in the definition of consent, which is that no student can consent to sexual conduct with a district employee. Right now, we say no person under 18 can give legal consent.
16.
16, sorry. But I think we need to make clear that
Student.
no
So it could
student can give legal consent to an employee of the district.
could it be an extension of that sentence? Under New Hampshire law, a person under the age of 16 cannot give legal consent, and no student
Sure.
can ever.
And I'll find the exact, I'll pull it
Yeah,
out of
per,
there.
Yeah.
per,
Yeah.
per board
It's
policy.
it's in the law, so.
Yeah.
So,
Consent.
I'll find the
Yeah,
RSA.
and I feel like we looked at language similar to that not too long ago. To find it.
I'm sure we have it other places, but I just
Yeah.
thought it would
Yeah,
be
I
something
can-
we should
I-
include in the definition.
For sure.
So,
It's a
okay.
good cross-reference. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello.
Barb. So now, if we're down on, still on page 6, can we give Barb a minute?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
She's quick.
Welcome, Barb.
Did you get my text?
I did. I texted you back.
Oh,
Yeah.
I left my phone.
Totally fine. So just to catch you up, we are currently reviewing Concord School Board Policy 415.
Great.
While it may not feel like a first draft, because we have seen this before, it is a first draft because we're going back to the previous Title IX.
Oh, right.
Yep. And so everything has been pretty
Red,
standard.
then green, then
Yep,
yellow, then
you
back
get
to
it.
green, then
You
back to
know-
red.
You know exactly where we are then. So
Yeah.
we,
Green.
and then there's some green. So we are on page 6 of 27, when you're ready, and we're about mid-page.
We're down at the red on the second to last paragraph where it says conduct that meets one or more of the above will not constitute Title IX. And they changed some of the wording, but it has, you have to be within the continental within the United States, excuse me. And we have to have control over both and we can change it again if you want to. It says harasser and respondent, which is really the same thing. It should be the respondent and the complainant. Okay, in the context in which the harassment occurred. And then, in the last sentence, the same conduct may, however, be addressed under Board Policy 161.1 is in there. So, then the follow-on paragraph that starts with regard to concurrent enrollment, same language from the 2020 version, and it is consistent with the school board's language. Then they go on to the non-Title IX sexual harassment. That is all new language, word for word.
On the second to last sentence, I think there's just a typo. I
On
can't
where,
figure.
on what page?
Under non-Title IX sexual harassment, first
Yeah.
paragraph, I just can't figure out what the word is supposed to be. And truer verbal,
Where,
second
Or-
sentence, second to last sentence in that.
oh, gotcha. Request for sexual favors. I think it's or. Hang on a second.
And or, maybe?
And or. Let's see. Non-Title IX sexual harassment is. Is defined as favors and other verbal, non-verbal or physical
It
contact.
should be other.
And
And other.
other.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
No.
You know, me
We had
neither.
several
Sorry,
options.
guys. Trying to, so.
Well, like I said, we were working on formatting.
Yeah.
It's okay. You always take it so personally.
Yeah,
It's not,
no,
it's
we're
not a
we're
jab
not.
on you, I
Trust
promise.
me, we're not.
We just want it to be
Yeah,
clean.
no.
And so, those are the new sections that were added for non-Title IX. If there are any questions there?
I am gonna be that girl and say it needs to be earlier in the definition section in alphabetical order. So it'll need to be 11 at some point.
And supportive measures.
I think they put it in under the sexual I looked at that too.
I know, I've
But
seen
they're, it's weird, because they
Oh,
put
you're
it
saying it's underneath?
sexual harassment, because you have
no.
Title
This
IX
is
and then
what-
you have non-Title IX.
See, they put under the definition of sexual harassment, and then
Yeah.
they put all of this.
Yep.
And then comes supportive
So
measures.
it's sexual harassment, and then there's
They even
two
put-
subtypes.
Do they put stalking
Correct.
under?
Title
No.
IX
No,
and
no,
non-Title
Stalking is
IX.
separate.
Stalking is not defined here.
Okay, I mean, as long as it's a sub.
Stalking is not a definition to me.
No, stalking
subsection.
is one that was added in the 2020 version, in ours.
Okay.
But I don't know, oh, because it's,
It isn't in there, like that was something the board did.
Right.
no,
Okay.
it just looks terrible. I don't like how supportive measures is the last definition. Like, these two definitions are down here after you had all this other jumble. But if you're going in alphabetical order, I get.
Yeah, that's how I guess they defined them.
All right, that's good. Okay, so
Okay.
let's actually, are we good with the language on Title IX sexual harassment? Which we'll just need to capitalize sexual harassment.
Yep.
On non-Title IX? Yep, okay. Perfect, and then other instead of poor. You get down to the last one, supportive measures. These are the same measures, 1 through 3 are the same, that they've included. On our 2020 version, we also added 4 through 8 as additional, because those are some of the ones we've actually used. So I kept those in there. I recommend they stay. And they're just a few small changes on the last sentence in that remaining paragraph about they're confidential, with exclusive exceptions stated and required in the section below, which is the confidentiality section, whatever that ends up being right now. And then I'll keep going unless there are any
Yeah, go
questions.
for it,
Okay. Then Title IX coordinator, it used to be you had to have the name, the place, everything else. Got rid of that, and under the new, and so, or excuse me, in the old one, it talks about the duties. You have to respond, pretty much same language except for, as I said, the red. I can take specific general reports, help them with formal, and then it goes down A through G, and then the little Roman numerals are all the things that the Title IX coordinator is responsible for doing. Cara, I wasn't sure, again, I capitalized the first letter of each because I wanted to be, I'm not sure, but I think we have in the past, so I left those. F, which is there, was something that New Hampshire School Board put in that was not in our earlier version, so I added that.
I think there's an extra comma there,
Where?
or an extra end.
Coordinating with district and school level personnel to facilitate and assure implementation of investigations and remedies and helping to
So
assure.
so it should probably be no comma, investigations and remedies, comma, and helping to assure that
Yeah, and
the
it should, I
district
think it should be.
otherwise meets its
Not according
obligations.
to New Hampshire, if it was just copyright from New Hampshire.
It was. I didn't change a word, you guys. I left it because I know you don't want to see the changes. And I don't think it should be assure. I think it should be ensure.
Ensure. I was gonna say it, and then I was like, keep it to yourself, Cara.
Yeah.
I have this.
Yeah, sure means they're there now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I changed that.
That's copyright.
Everything else going down the page, I inserted. Well, I still have sec, but I'll put the big is section. I'll spell it out and insert the right numbers or the right paragraphs, obviously Roman numerals. We get down to training. Pretty much, there weren't a bunch of changes, just small word changes. In case anybody has any questions about those.
No. And I apologize. I mean,
No problem.
just so that everybody here has likely seen this at some point, but because we've recently seen it, I'm fairly comfortable with moving forward at a quicker pace.
No, that's
But
fine.
if anyone has a question, please jump in, because I know we've seen it recently, but it is very dense language.
Yeah, it's complex, so. All right, moving on to training, down at the bottom of page 9. Again, they wanted to add under this policy or C-board policy, and I just left, I figured it was easy under any responsibilities. I took that out. I'm happy to leave it in otherwise. All the way down 1 through 5, if you just take a look, simple word changes, decision hyphen makers. I tried to keep it consistent all the way through. I couldn't remember. Did we do the hyphen last time, or did we?
bringing it up again? We had such a fight.
I know whether decision maker should be cap.
It is currently not hyphenated
So
in the
it-
definitions.
all right.
I was
I
gonna
got
say,
it
are we
wrong.
pro or anti-hyphen here?
Okay,
What's
so
our policy on the
You've got a
hyphen?
different crowd now.
Yeah,
I would not be pro hyphen.
I am
This
also
is
not pro hyphen.
all right,
Get rid of that hyphen.
it's gone. Sorry about
All right.
that.
It's not
Is it one word or two?
It's
two
words.
2 words.
I mean, I'm not pro the phrase decision makers. Let's just be.
If we
but
have
if we're going to use it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it is a title within. Believe it or not, they call them IDMs.
Yeah, that's fine.
initial
So
decision
makers,
in
2
the appeal.
words, no hyphen.
Okay,
Is-
and
is
should
where
makers
we're
be
at.
capitalized?
Yes, because
Okay.
that's, I mean,
The
you know.
title.
Title within.
Yeah.
Got it.
It's a problem.
Okay. Again, confidentiality. A, provide both the parties due process. I crossed if allegations concern or formal complaint has been filed in such, I can't remember why I crossed it out, to be honest with you. I didn't like the language.
Allegations, so.
Um,
Examples of required disclosure include information to either party to the extent necessary to provide the parties due process during the Title IX grievance process, if allegations concern Title IX sexual harassment or a formal complaint has been filed instituting Title IX grievance process under Section Rome 3, Cap A. I'm not sure why it's needed.
Yeah, they put it in there, and I put it in there, and then I crossed it out because I didn't like it, but I want to show it to you. So I did add in under C our board policy 432 because that's our neglect and
Child
abuse. Then I spelled out New Hampshire DOE because I thought that was the first time. It's the first time I saw it used. So we could put it in parens after if you wanted to as an acronym, but I don't recall it being used afterwards. And then I just on number 2 below, I got rid of additionally any and just went with any small word changes there. Then went, if you go down to the bottom on number 3, all the way A through F. Let's see, I want to make sure, retaliation. They only, A, B, C, D, yep, same things. They use small Roman numerals, we use letters. I defer to Cara. Retaliation, I'm not making fun of you, I
No,
promise.
it's okay.
I'm not sure.
She's the one.
It's become
So,
fun. Let's do it.
Retaliation prohibited. They make a point, I think it's a good one, that just because, let's say somebody comes forward and makes a statement, and then it's not substantiated after the fact, because we can't meet the burden of preponderance of the evidence, that doesn't mean it was a false statement, it just means, so that's what that means there.
I think that's an important point.
Yep,
No kidding.
I read it 4 times,
didn't get,
and that's not I could not understand what the point was that was trying to be made a finding of responsibility alone. Like, who is being found?
your decision maker will decide whether it's substantiated or not, and let's say they don't substantiate the allegation, that does not mean that the complainant made a materially false statement.
So I think to say, if the fact that a complaint may not be substantiated does not is insufficient to conclude that the complainant made a materially false statement.
Yep.
I think let's put that in plainer English.
Yep, you got it.
I agree.
So Pam, what would you like there? A finding isn't,
A finding that a complaint is not substantiated is insufficient to conclude that a person
Finding of responsibility.
is made a materially false statement in bad
Yeah,
faith.
this is- You understand that?
That's
I understand it, but not only because
Right.
we've talked about it.
yeah.
That makes no sense at all.
So, is there anywhere else in the policy where we talk about whether or not there are consequences for a person making a material false statement in bad faith?
No.
So this is the only time
This
this
is
comes
it,
up.
yep.
So I do think we need to be explicit and careful
Yep.
with our language, because what we're suggesting is that it is possible that if the finding is not substantiated, that somebody could then step forward and say, this was a false claim made against me in bad faith. But we have no process for that in the policy.
Yeah, so it's two things. You could be punitive where you shouldn't be, or somebody gets off with
Or there
doing,
just wasn't,
doing a mean
yeah,
thing.
there
Right.
wasn't enough
Yeah.
evidence. But
Yeah.
And we're basically, in this sentence, saying that there is a path forward for someone to come forward and say that this person has made false statements against me in bad faith, and the fact that you didn't substantiate the claim means that I'm right. And I think that's what we're trying to say can't happen. but it sounds like we don't have a formal process.
It's both ways, really, but I don't want to make it more complicated.
Yeah.
I mean, because the victim could be, if it's not substantiated, you could look at the victim and say, potentially, well, you made a false statement, because it
Right.
isn't true. Doesn't mean it isn't true, it just means we can't prove it, okay? Likewise, if the respondent says, I didn't do it, and we find that they did do it, did they lie in saying they didn't do it just because we came up with it? Maybe, maybe not. You hope you got it right, but you wouldn't then charge them on top of that for making a materially false statement when they said, I didn't do what you say I did. So it's pretty complicated. I'm happy to, it's school board language.
Do you want to massage it a little bit and come back to us with what you think would be appropriate?
Sure. I will simplify.
Yeah, make it
Okay.
simple.
As much plain language.
Yep. Going down the rest of the page, all I did was capitalize the first letters on A through F. And then I took out on number 3 on the top of page 12, where it talks about, they specifically they talk about the Title IX coordinators, investigators, and decision makers. I just went with personnel.
Yeah.
Keep it simple. Added in a section there. And then under X, so what is that, 9? Roman records and record
11.
keeping? Is that 11? Okay.
11.
Yep. Added in an additional criteria they wanted. B is new.
Basis for the district's conclusion that its response was not deliberately
Yeah, and that's a
I'm
legal,
assuming that's legal.
it's a legal term. Deliberately indifferent means that did we act the way we should have that we should have acted reasonably, knowing all the circumstances that we knew at the time, or we just say we're going to ignore this. We would be deliberately indifferent under that definition if we just didn't move forward knowing what we knew at the time. It's a pretty high standard, thank goodness. So if we were to ignore something, knowing somebody made a report and we just said, nah, doesn't make sense, we're not going to look into it, we could be found to be deliberately indifferent.
And this is as it pertains, for in terms of you're keeping a record.
Correct.
Of any actions that you took, including any supportive measures. You are recording the basis for the district's conclusion that its response to the complaint was not deliberately indifferent.
Correct.
So maybe to the complaint might be helpful, I'm not sure. And documentation, and then Rome's small 1 and 2.
Yes.
So this is really about what your responsibility is.
Correct, and really what this pertains to is where the district decides after looking at the facts, we look at it and we say either it doesn't fall into the jurisdiction under Title IX for some reason, let's say we didn't have control over the activity or the program, so I would document that fact, but then I'm gonna look at, does it fall under one of our other policies, okay? So they're asking us to go through the mental exercise of what did you consider at the time to determine whether our conclusions were reasonable. Just doing that documentation alone and the analysis will help keep us from being deliberately indifferent.
Okay.
But it is a legal term,
That's okay.
okay? I think, any other questions about, and then under 2B, which is in red there, all materials used to train, I could be consistent and go with personnel again like I did above, instead of
Yeah.
naming everybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
Decision makers.
We're just all training materials.
What's that?
All training materials.
Used to train all training materials,
Period.
yeah. Used to, no. Is
All
that too many
training materials, period.
Just all training materials?
Yeah.
Period. Okay. Sorry, you
Isn't that
guys.
what you were saying, Kara?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm not getting it.
No,
It
that's
has
okay.
been
I'm just saying, I'm
long.
trying
This sentence added in.
I'm trying to help you out.
No,
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Please. Got it.
Yeah, I was waiting too, like, and.
And?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, moving on, to page 13. Very, very small, I crossed out he, she, or she, he. We're still doing, hopefully, we want it to
Any
be,
person may report sexual harassment whether relating to themselves or another
or
person.
that
Yeah,
person.
that's perfect.
And then I changed the 24 hours because we had agreed earlier that we were gonna go the end of the next school day, so I added that in. Question, do we want, for some reason I went back to the original and I can't tell you why I did it. other than I probably followed a thing. We did use the italicized, okay, and then I put in bold, the failure to report will subject the employee to discipline up to and including dismissal. I know why I did that. I wanted to make sure I gave proper notice. Do you care whether we italicize or bold, or you just want to leave it alone? That is our language. It's not in the go by.
I mean, if it's new language that we are drafting as part of a new policy, we need to indicate it in red.
No, it's not. It's language
So
from
this
the
is how the
old.
existing policy looks.
Correct. It's the current 2020 version.
Okay.
Even in the italicized and the
Bold.
bolded.
I mean, it's
I know.
very bold. I mean, my personal preference would would be no italics and no bold. We tend to save italics for notes, like legal notes, editor's notes, things like that. So it's sort of essentially suggesting that there's extra material that we'd like the reader to understand. But this doesn't really qualify for that.
Okay.
No, both of these are like to make a point.
Right.
So
Yep.
we don't need, yeah,
No, I don't think we need it.
right.
but-
Okay.
I would agree.
So
Note.
we want to give a time.
Oh, you actually want to talk about the content, not the
We
format?
were just talking about the font,
Yeah.
the italics and the
Oh,
bold.
fine. You wanna talk
That's
about
all
the
we're talking about right
words?
now.
Okay. Well, we've gone back and forth about this.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, I see that, but that was for the next, the new version.
Mhm.
This is going back to the old version that doesn't give a
Eight.
time
The old-
recommendation.
I thought we gave them
This
24
one's saying
hours.
it's an existing policy.
It used to be 24.
in our existing.
In our existing
Board
policy.
policy.
That's what I'm s-
But you're saying New Hampshire School Board
Does not.
Association does not have a recommendation
Correct.
for a timeline.
So we have reasons to be more stringent than the School Board
Yes.
Association on this. My concern about the language, the end of the next school day, is that could be 2 weeks,
Right.
3 weeks, you know?
Right, if it's a
And that's-
vacation,
If it's
the last
after
day of school,
vacation,
yeah.
last day of school, you
Could it
know?
be 24 hours? Or, yeah.
Yeah, if it
That's
happened
why
the
we
last
did
day
it.
of school,
Right.
it could be the, over the summer, right?
Yeah.
When someone could be teaching in
Yeah.
a summer camp or
Yes,
something.
exactly.
So,
Well, and now you've got me thinking, did we switch it from the next school day to 24 hours, or did we switch it from 24 hours to the next school day? I feel like maybe we actually switched it
Yeah.
To
to
24
24
hours.
To
hours.
see.
So,
Okay.
so I actually think that Pam is making the point we landed on eventually.
We
was-
should stick with
is
24
24
hours.
hours.
Yeah, because if something horrible happens on a Friday afternoon, it's not necessarily the right thing to do to wait till Monday.
right.
Right.
Yeah, the comp, I have to be honest with you, and
Yeah,
tell you
me
they
too. Keep
probably
your fingers
will, but
crossed.
All
I
right.
wish we could say or, but you're right, if you have a weekend or a holiday, it's gonna get delayed.
And if, scarily enough, you have someone involved in whatever the altercation is that could use this as a way to get it pushed, you know what I mean?
Sooner the better.
Yeah,
and-
Yeah.
right,
And the
Okay.
staff is very good about that.
yeah.
Yeah.
24 hours.
Very
Yeah.
good about
There
that.
we go.
I mean, without delay and no later.
Yeah, I think that works.
Okay.
And no later, I'll get rid of and in case, and
Yeah.
in no case later, and no later. Got it. Okay. Going on down, I put the little graph box in there, and remember, we took it out of the 161, I think it was.
Yeah, we did.
And I also, any student should have been yellow, but it's any. And then I updated New Hampshire Commission for Human Rights. They've actually changed to 57 Regional Drive. I have their current address as of the 22nd of April. And then the phone number changed on the Office for Civil Rights, and I have their email address. I guess my question is, I think it's important that we give them this feedback, because it is true that nobody has to come directly through us. OCR would call us and say, did they file a report? But they can go directly. So I think it's important we put that notice in there. I just didn't know do you like the format? Would you rather not put it in a box?
No, I think it's fine.
Okay, good. Same thing for below number 6.
We just have to,
Change the colors.
well, yeah, and it goes past the margin, so we just
Yeah.
have to change the format of the text box.
Page 13, yeah. Okay. Moving to 14, again, just sorry about green being yellow, it should have been. And then do you want me to keep, I put these in as additional support mechanisms in the event somebody, you know, it's mostly for the touching, the lack of consent issue, if somebody needs help, if you need to go to the hospital or whatever, this is in here and I can update all the numbers if you want to keep it. It's in ours, it's not in the New Hampshire School Board Association.
Right. Is Haven now Thrive? No. Who's Thrive now?
Who's what?
Is it the
Crisis Center
Crisis Center is now Thrive? So we had updated this
Right.
language before, because Crisis Center of Central New Hampshire is now.
It's been
And
renamed.
the suicide line prevention is different.
Yep.
So yeah, I think yes to this as long as we update it, which
Okay.
we did update it for our last
161.
version, so we can
Point one, I
find
think.
it there.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's double check on that.
Yep, got it. Okay. Unless there are any questions about the formatting, I did under 2C, they put that in there, and I felt it was redundant with A, because 2A talks about inform and discuss the availability, and it came off of and offer support measures with or without the filing of a formal complaint. That's our language, it should come over more underneath. But they say the same thing in C, so I just
Took it out.
took it out. I lined through it.
Yep.
Okay? Moving on, if everybody's good. Again, just inserted Title IX. Do you want me to capitalize sexual harassment under formal complaints, after Title IX?
So there, throughout this document, there is sometimes capitalization and sometimes not. So I'm sort of withholding the conversation until later, till we make those decisions. But if the idea is that we capitalize every defined term, then we've got to run through this whole document
Yep.
and capitalize everything.
Okay,
Because elsewhere in the document, it is capitalized.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of, I'm willing to help
capitals.
with whatever
they don't, but we do.
formatting we want.
Yeah, what difference is that?
So,
It doesn't really, it's
Yeah,
really
it
just,
doesn't matter.
all right, so I'll put a question mark, just so we want to, okay. Moving on to page 15, I'm gonna let y'all take a look at what was added and see if you have any objections. Again, it's in red.
yep. Works for me. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Nope.
Okay.
No? Okay. Page 16, very, very similar wording. They did add the red line in the middle about deliberate indifference. Reports of sexual assault and plea on student harassment, repeat reports, the conduct in the complainant's report has not been adequately resolved through supportive measures. That kind of defines a little bit if we were to do nothing. And then again, following on, crossing out that right below it, even though that language appeared in the 2020 version as the original, I struck it, don't recommend we go forward with that one. Changed he, she below to they. And then down below, when we're talking about if no complaint is filed by the complainant, I wanted to be sure complaints have to be 18 for us not to notify the guardian or the parents. So I've added if it's filed by the complainant, the complainant's parent or guardian or the Title IX coordinator. Both there, and the same thing would apply for the respondent as well, as if somebody files a report, we have to notify the parent, the student obviously, but also the parent or guardian of the student if they're under 18. Okay.
So the next paragraph looks like it's existing already.
What does?
The next paragraph, it looks like we already had this.
Can you just like tell me where you're
Sure,
at?
although there is no time limit
Yep.
to filing a formal complaint.
Correct.
The complainant must be employed by the district or participating in or attempting to participate in the education programs or activities of the district at the time of filing.
Correct. So
So,
really there is, because if you're not are you going to say there is, because if they're no
no,
longer
that's not what I'm
employee-
gonna say. What I'm gonna
Okay.
say is, if somebody has left the district and they've graduated and they were subject to inappropriate sexual misconduct by an employee of this district, I want them to file a complaint. It may not, I want to know that, even if it is after the fact. Like, so,
Maybe
obviously.
they don't have the guts until they're
Right,
graduating.
I mean, we have seen a lot of
Yeah.
this across the country.
Well, then others come forward.
And
It becomes a Concord police matter at that point, because we don't have jurisdiction over that person anymore. We do the employee though.
But we may still have jurisdiction over the employee.
Absolutely.
So, and that's and it may not be a matter where the police feel like they can file charges, but it may still be a matter where we feel like that is not based on new information, appropriate conduct for somebody in our classrooms.
Right. I would agree, I totally agree with the premise. I just don't agree that it's consistent with Title IX though. Because we don't have jurisdiction over both parties at that point.
We've had a similar situation. We didn't have jurisdiction. We did over the employee, but not of the person who made the complaint.
Right.
But the police stepped in
Or
immediately
we had
because
Concord
calls
take it,
were.
because it's a criminal
Yeah.
matter as well.
So I don't know how we can compel somebody who's already graduated. Of course, we want to encourage them.
Not,
Yeah.
right, and this isn't saying they're compelled to do it. This is saying we won't accept their complaint
I
after
would
they've
screen it out.
graduated.
Right.
We would,
Couldn't we
so
add-
really, like, I am worried about a policy that says, like, you can complain, but we're gonna just toss that in the trash, and I know we wouldn't, but that's how
Right.
Couldn't we had or has participate, like, so it talks about they're either participating or they're attempting to or they're going to, like, what about they had participated in district and, like, can't we just put that in so it
Yeah,
covers
I
those
would
people?
just get rid of, although the district will initiate the Title IX grievance process, or maybe it's not, although the district will initiate a personnel investigation regardless of when a formal complaint is filed, delays in reporting may significantly impair. So we don't call it a Title IX investigation. It would be a personnel
Right.
investigation.
Right.
That's me. Others may feel differently, but
No, you wanna close the loopholes though, you wanna make sure that if someone has something to say, they don't feel
Right.
like they're not allowed to say it.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it's a good eye.
and yes, it's a police, but I think there's probably things that there are different criminal standards than personnel standards.
Right.
I agree with you. I'm just reading this to try to find where we can fit in language that we could suggest.
So where it says, although there is no time limit to filing a formal complaint for complaints initiated by the complainant or their parent or guardian, the complainant must be employed by the district, comma, or have participated in, or currently participating in. If we put the have participated in, wouldn't that include anyone that was once in the district that left the district? Like, isn't it that simple?
Yeah, except for it doesn't work under the jurisdictional requirements. You have to be currently for Title IX.
So
Oh, I see.
Yeah, we could still
Okay.
do it, just not for Title IX.
Right. Oh, and that's what,
Yeah.
okay.
So
So
we
what-
could call it a personnel investigation.
yeah, and
Okay.
So it might be just a
reference-
fully separate sentence, which is we're covering, that we understand there's no time limit, but there's these
If the
conditions.
complainant has left the district, it will be treated as a personnel.
Exactly.
Right.
So something like that, where we acknowledge that a complaint may come in that is outside of the jurisdiction of the formal process, but that may initiate a personnel
Right.
investigation as needed or as warranted by the
Yeah.
superintendent.
yeah,
I shall massage it.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Thank
got
you.
it. Yep,
Can you,
no problem.
you got enough information on that?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
right here. Okay. Moving on to page 17, again, just small changes. I said if the complaint, we're talking about the initial steps and notice of a formal complaint, where you have to, it just was redundant to me because if a complainant is under 18, then we have to notify the parent or the guardian, and they put that in there, but they also talk about being non-eligible, so I thought it was a little redundant. If the complaint is I just put it is under 18, okay? Same thing with the respondent. then capitalized all the first words in A through F. Okay, I think that was it on that. Again, page, am I going too fast? 18, I'm just, again, word choices, and I should probably spell out IDM again under 6, where I did put in IDM and then I struck it in red and used the acronym, because I always spell it out the first time and then I put the acronym in there. So I recommend under 6, where it says initial decision maker,
I would leave it in.
then IDM should be in parentheses, so I will spell out. Again, I added in the sections on my draft. Under number 7, we're gonna seek guidance from the district's general counsel, and G and C should be capitalized. There's a title there. I missed that the first time. Everything else, I think. If there are any questions? Nope. Okay.
IDM doesn't have to be a definition.
It's what? I'm sorry.
IDM doesn't need to be a definition.
IDM is the initial decision maker, and it is a, there's the initial decision maker, and then there's the appeal decision maker. So where are you, Liz?
I just didn't know if those needed to be included in the definitions section.
Right. So
Oh.
we actually discussed this before, because we had talked about the fact that there's decision makers, but then there's 2 subsets of decision makers that come up only in the second half.
Yep.
I don't honestly remember where we landed, but I think if I remember right, it proved difficult to put it in the definitions section, because I don't think we have a formal definition in state law or Title IX. Maybe it's in Title IX.
It is in here. You know what I can do? I can go back, now that I'm thinking about this, I can pull our 2020 version, because we had it done, and it was hours later.
Yep.
Remember that,
Yes.
after our meeting,
So,
that
yeah,
they
if you
changed
wanna
it?
look at the most-
So I'll look at that to see what we decided to do with IDM. And also, no, we already figured out decision maker, so, okay. Everything else, I think, is pretty self-explanatory, but please ask if you have any questions on that page. If there are none, moving on to page 19, again, capitalized in the titles. I went from he, she, or she, he to they. In 7C, I capitalized the Code of Student Conduct. That is a policy that we have. I thought it should be capitalized. Then on page 20, you have your timelines. I think those are pretty explanatory.
I don't know. I made a note to take it out. I think it's just old. Sorry, we just mentioned that we're gonna take out some of this underlining, just because like.
Yeah, and the numbers, I don't know why they showed up.
Actually in here.
Yeah, but I just think it like pops up halfway through, all of a sudden
Yeah.
we start underlining things, so I've marked it to remove in the formatting fun we're gonna have later.
Maybe you should,
Get a job at NHS. They won't fire me immediately. But I will also just mention, this is something that didn't come up before, which is that now we have this section 7 with a whole new definitions section.
Range of disciplinary
page are you on?
sanction.
Page 19 of 27.
Yeah, okay.
Those are the sanctions.
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay, so, well, I guess, I mean, they are definitions, but they're just
The types of
descriptions of
yeah.
just sanctions, so.
Yeah.
it's just like the IDM.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's like a whole new policy.
Well, also
starts.
like sanction. Some of these are words that
They're tough, yeah.
no, well, people know. Like,
You mean they shouldn't be defined because they know it?
because
Sanctions,
sanctions has a commonly understood meaning, and we're actually using it within the commonly
Right.
understood.
Right, I think we could easily remove the quotations and the sentence would read perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think you can do that. Yeah.
And get rid of quotes.
And
You got it.
I agree that we should never use the phrase IDM. I don't think we need to repeat it
I don't either.
with parentheses. I think we should just spell it out every time, because it is
Then we
not.
don't need to.
Okay.
It is not a common,
So get rid of it.
Yeah, it's not like a CEO. Right.
It's not.
Okay.
It's like, what the heck
and
is
it shouldn't become. Just to be clear.
We do not recommend making that plain with.
You got it. Gone. Okay. All right, moving on to, look at this, page 21 of 27. Very few changes. On my version, I added in the sections, but I'm not going to bore you with those in case they change. Got rid of, just adding in a few extra words and
We're gonna pause you just real quick.
Yep.
And on page 20, there are some days where we talk about the timeline.
Mm-hmm.
So we had also discussed timeline.
we did, but we had changed the timelines as a group when I was working with New Hampshire School Board on the 2024. This is, these were the original ones for the 2020.
Okay.
And they're still recommended as the same ones
Okay.
by New Hampshire School Board.
And by the district. This
Correct.
is a timeline that you are comfortable with.
Correct.
Okay. Really good.
They go on, these go on forever. These can go on a very long time, up to 6 months sometimes.
Okay, all right, please continue.
Okay. Page 21, again, just some small, and I'll slow down here. I would say we need a space under 1F between F and G, but other than that, just some small word changes that are explained in red. 22. I got rid of what I thought was a lot of wordy stuff like toward completion, and just put progress. Small word changes. Ooh, there's IDM again.
There it is.
I know, I saw that.
And there's a hyphen.
I'm gonna get
On
Oh,
number
the things you find
4,
funny in these
under
meetings.
determination of responsibility and initial decision maker, the IDM will provide 5 days for each for. Oh, never mind. It looked a little
5
weird.
days each for supplementary.
Limited follow-up questions. Yep. Okay, never mind.
Right. It probably doesn't need the comma, but.
You want me to get rid after supplementary? Is that what you're talking about?
No, it's totally fine. It just,
Okay.
it's an awkward sentence to see, but when you read it, it's okay.
So here where we use
I thought a
IDM,
word was missing, but
Yeah,
then
me
when I
too.
read it out loud, I'm like, oh, now I get where it's going.
where I use the acronyms here, the IDM, do you want me to spell them out in each one? It's kind of wordy. Happy to do it, but
I mean, I'm fine with the acronym. in
As long
this
as we're
very
consistent.
specific section.
Yes.
okay.
But then you don't use it like it goes back and forth. So.
Right, and we use it on the next page under 5, 6, and 7, and 8.
But not 9.
Nope, we don't.
So.
Yeah.
So I need to be very consistent.
I just feel it's used so much that it should be in the definition section
Yeah.
as an IDM.
Well, let's look at because I agree, because even if we didn't decide that, maybe because this language is different, because I think maybe the newer language really didn't talk about the decision maker nearly as much. Like,
No.
I don't think this was in there.
Yes, that's
in the
right.
Biden administration's version, I think that the question came up because we didn't have all this language where we're repeating this over and over again. So I think maybe Liz
Again,
does
on
have
the
a
next
point
page.
that it's worth having it in the definition section.
Okay. Got it.
Just the idea, right?
IDM, just, initial decision maker. You got it. Oh, no hyphen. I hyphenated
Yep, no
it.
hyphen.
Okay, got it.
As the IDM, I think it doesn't matter.
So once you guys are gonna kill me. Once I define it in the definition section, does that mean I have to capitalize it and spell it out? And not use the
Not
acronym?
if it's in the if it's in the
In a different
definition
sec-
section, you can call it an IDM.
In the definition
throughout.
section.
Yes, because they've
Afterward.
seen. when
Initial
I see
decision
IDM,
maker,
this is what it
IDM,
means.
you got it. Okay, perfect, that's what I'm gonna do. Yes, okay. 24. Okay. I hyphenated dismissal of a formal complaint and added in the additional language. Said even though it gets dismissed as a Title IX, it may go under 161.1. I mean, we'll look at other ways that it could potentially be handled. It is bolded.
Because I mean, you're demonstrating that the written notice should be bolded, is what I'm interpreting that as.
Okay. And then we move into the appeal process. Initial determination of responsibility from your initial decision maker. Okay? Then you move on, and goes through. I'm sorry some of these paragraphs get a little longer and we're gonna have to number them separately, but just a small change of words as you go through. Nothing major.
There's even an ADM.
And
So
this
now we
is
have an ADM,
Right,
so-
we've now we've arrived at the ADM portion
Yes.
of the document.
the appeal.
Appeal decision maker.
Correct.
Oh my God.
Do you want that defined too?
Yeah.
Let's find it. Look at how many times I can find it.
Yeah,
We're
but
playing
it's
a
not a
game
lot
first.
because it's only part of the
Right,
appeal
it's just
process.
part of
so
Appoint
it's
a
really near
decision
the
maker
end.
for appeal. It's in the definition, it's in the paragraph that starts within 3 days of receipt of a written appeal on page 25. The ADM.
But then it's repeated. It's 8. I'm up to 8 times.
Okay. ADM.
What about, I know, this is crazy talk, but for the appeals process, the definition could just be at the outset of this section, for the purposes of this section, because we don't talk about it anywhere else.
Anywhere else.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree, it shouldn't be in the beginning of the whole thing.
Yeah.
I never remember what it was.
So put in a little verbiage about for the purpose of this.
Yeah,
For the
just
pur-
as a definition.
Is it a subsection or just a section?
This section, for the purposes of this section, ADM means,
Not to be confused with IDM.
right, ADM means the
Okay.
decision maker for appeal.
Bum, bum,
Does
bum.
not mean the average daily membership, which
Yeah,
is what
no,
it
it's-
usually means in school districts
ADM,
language.
right.
All right, I shall
It's like
add that
how.
in. All right, and then we get into page 26, informal resolution. I just capitalized where, eliminated it precludes the parties and changed it to parties are precluded. Guess I must have had extra time on my hands. That's it, and then I updated the legal references. And when we're ready and it gets finally revised, I'll add the date.
Yeah. New date.
Sorry, I'm reading the very final sentence. In no event may the district offer or facilitate an informal resolution process to resolve allegations that an employee sexually harassed a student.
That's the one.
That's that.
Yeah, that's the one exception that you can't do informal. You have to go through the formal grievance.
Oh, I see. I think it should just be its read written note. It looks like it's underneath the written notice, and I got confused, but we're good.
It's
We'll just, yeah.
formatting.
Yep. Okay, great.
Okay.
Okay, so it looks like we are back at the first page where we had considered eliminating the second of the red paragraphs on page 1. That was still a question mark. At this point, I'm fine with removing it. I think it's very clear where you can find the formal complaint and grievance procedure process.
Yeah.
So we can go ahead and get rid of that, Karen.
Okay,
And that final sentence in the first red paragraph.
great.
You are gonna come back to us with some massaged language. We're going to, in all cases, make the section numbers consistent with the numbering, which I will assist with.
Thank you.
We're gonna make those citations correct.
Change the words harasser and victim.
We're gonna-
remove those.
Yep, make sure that the words harasser and victim
Is
throughout
respondent and
are respondent and complainant. We are gonna modify the definition of consent to make clear that no student can ever give consent to a staff member. We are going to remove on page 6 of 27 the definitions for severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive. We are going to make consistent throughout the references to any policy shall be called board policy. We are okay with non-Title IX sexual harassment staying as a subset of sexual harassment in the definitions section.
Good.
Decision maker.
Decision maker will be 2 words, no hyphen. On page 11, section 8, Karen is going to come back to us with new language around what it means to make a materially false statement in bad faith, just to be clear about what that sentence is really trying to say. On page 12, looks like section Rome 11 2B will be changed to all training materials. We're going to make sure that the timeline will be 24 hours and not the end of the next school day when it comes to reporting requirements. We're going to update the resource information for the outside resources for sexual harassment support. We are going to, because at this point in the document, we start underlining headings, we're going to take those headings out.
And we also need to decide on,
And we're gonna capitalize anytime we mention Title IX sexual harassment.
Right, it's
We need to capitalize
capitalized.
that as a defined term.
Kara, did you say we're not underlining, right?
We're not.
We're not, it's just
Good.
because it just all of a sudden starts happening.
Yep.
And why not, just take it out.
Got it.
Okay. I have something on page 16 that just says KFA to add. but I
Yeah,
didn't write it.
massage, personal investigation, will, I think, is that the deliberate indifference? No, let's see.
Right, no, it was,
No.
It was the,
Oh, the
And
personnel
request.
investigation.
Oh,
yes, yes.
Even if we
Thank
don't
you.
do a Title IX, we will
Yes.
pursue.
yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just hadn't written that out, thanks.
like, had they left the district by the time they complained.
Correct.
That part, yeah.
Yep. Yep. But let's say the staff.
I mean, we have language along those lines at the end, but I think we
No,
should
it's
have
good
it
there.
there
Might as well
too,
have it.
but,
Because that might be where somebody goes to look,
yeah.
so, yeah.
Okay. I'm up to page 19. We're going to remove the quotes around disciplinary sanctions and remedial actions. We have established that we are going to define initial decision maker in the definitions section. Are we still feeling good about that?
We are, the
Okay.
IDM.
I just think it says IDM everywhere.
Okay. And then, so the IDM will go in the full definition section, but then in the appeals process, because that's the only time the ADM is mentioned, we'll just note it for the section.
Correct.
And that is all I have. Does anyone else have any comments, questions, concerns, or anything else regarding Concord School Board Policy 415, first draft?
Thanks, everybody.
Excellent. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Speaker, I have a 7:00.
You have a 7 o'clock, okay.
I don't know.
Why don't we take a quick 2-minute recess, because I'd love to grab some water, and then we'll excuse Pam, and then we'll keep going on crowdfunding, if everybody else is okay? Still going?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. We're in a 2-minute recess.
To meet with your husband.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about it.
Thank you, everyone. We are back from recess. We are now going to look at policy 304 regarding crowdfunding. This is a new policy. I'm going to turn it over to the district to explain why we see this in front of us today.
I'm going to jump in. This has really been an impact on us, and it's really trying to give us some guardrails around all of the funding sources that our staff can use to help fund special projects and things that are desirous for classroom settings. And so we appreciate, I mean, just last week you had a donation of $6,600 for bicycles and helmets, right, out at Millbrook. But this is a little different because it often uses social media and other sites in which you can advertise your classroom needs. And we really just need guardrails because we don't know what's necessarily what's being purchased. And it's important because let me give you an example. If we're going to adopt a new reading program, we can't have staff going off and getting other things that aren't in
Aligned with the
compliance
program.
and aligned with it.
Yeah.
And, we've really tried to create some equity from building to building, so what happens at one building is the same as, across the district, especially with the elementary schools,
Yeah.
right? So having something that gives us some guardrails will help us do that. I mean, Ellen and Jack often oversee some of these crowdfunding efforts, and we're not clear about the money, how it's used. There are some companies that require specific information about our district that we do not release to a public entity. So we thought it was time. This is just a draft of we went out and looked at some other districts that have this to try to put together some idea to begin the discussion with you. We don't propose that this is the end all to be all for you, but to begin that discussion about it. So.
And what do you mean by Jack and Ellen oversee some of these?
Well, when a lot of these funds will come through for us to manage. So let's say a member of the staff gets some kind of a grant. Ellen oversees that.
Mm-hmm.
So we can monitor and manage it. And again, we're making sure it's well spent, it's well documented. Same with Jack. He and Ellen work very closely when it comes to monitoring those things.
So staff are allowed to apply to outside resource grants, applications. Do they have to go through the district to notify them that they're going to do that?
We need to know that they've done that.
And because your name will be on the application.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, and again, it's our way to monitor the expenditures, making sure that they're the grants are utilized in the way that it was dedicated to be done, and so that's important for us.
I have a clarifying question. So when I look at this, what immediately comes to mind for me as a former educator and coach in the district is stuff. So in August, you go on any teacher's Facebook page and there's a link to Amazon and to these different programs where you can buy things for their classroom or make and they list what they need, markers or pencils, this kind of stuff. I know that with our Red Dot project, there was a big link to buy at the high school for all the feminine hygiene products and all. So you could, I bought a bunch because it's a way to donate. So I do think too, sometimes it's good to have a structure because those two things in my mind can blur. I don't think about applying for a grant. The other piece is using Concord School District insignia when it's not necessarily a school district sponsored thing. Like the thrift shop up at the high school, when they reach out a lot for donations and things, but it's not a school district approved. It's the thrift store. So there's a lot that comes in that can get all muddled. And you're a PTO, so you understand too. So is this more grants or is it anything?
It's anything.
Okay, because it's so easy now to, people do GoFundMe's because they can't make their car payment. So asking people for money has become
Right, and you're always wary if there aren't those guardrails in place.
Yeah.
what happens when that money is coming in and
Yeah,
how
like-
is it done.
right,
And you don't
exactly.
want to put that kind of stress on anybody.
Right. Booster
And-
clubs, those
right,
kinds of things, yeah.
right.
Okay.
So we're trying to kind of clean it up a little bit and help staff understand how it works and how it can be done and utilized in a way that's productive for their classrooms. They've always done a list, before it wasn't on social media.
Yeah, you
just
sent
got
it
a
home,
list.
yeah.
You got a piece of
And
paper.
you'd get
you
80
did-
boxes of tissues and no
Right,
crayons.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But this is a little bit more than that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So that's why we wanted to be able to
And just a
try.
plug for PTOs, that many of the PTOs do have resources for the teachers for classroom purchases, so it's always important to reach out to the PTO if you're looking for
Yeah,
classroom
exactly.
donations.
Yeah.
The nice thing is too, the money, I mean, I say it's not a huge amount of money, but it does limit the amount of decision-making as to how much money. Principals can approve up to 500. Anything above 500, up to 2,500 has to come to Kathleen. Anything above 2,500 has to come to the board. And then they have to document after the fact how the money was used and benefited the kids. So there are some checks and
But
balances.
not if you are your own fiscal agent, like the PTO can receive grants.
Right.
You guys,
Right.
but for crowdfunding,
Right.
if it were
Right.
somebody here coming
Got
through
it,
this
okay.
policy, we still have to, comply with our gift instruction, if there's any overlap there.
With our policy on gifts.
Yes.
Which we do.
Well, and I would say, so I have a few questions. Number one, to some of the points that are being made, the definition of crowdfunding here is the practice of using online sites to solicit donations. So we are excluding in-person donations,
Right.
local businesses that might give the PTO a cut of that night, so I just want to make sure that the intention was to.
Yeah,
this-
fundraising activity is different than crowdfunding.
Right, so this
yeah.
policy is specific to fundraising through online sites.
Right.
So I'm saying this to.
Where you hit the Venmo
because-
button.
Right, because I feel like this is gonna generate some conversation, so I want to be
Sure.
very specific about what we're discussing. And I'm also curious if you've passed this language through any teachers or administrators.
Not
for
yet,
feedback.
not yet,
Okay.
no. We thought we would have a discussion with you first and see where you were at, because we knew it had impacted so many areas, with, we didn't want this to be seen as a PTO to
No.
prevent that. Booster clubs is another big one,
Well, that's why
for
I
us.
think when you
So,
go, include
yeah.
the ADs, include
Right.
Friends of Performing Arts, any
Right.
part of our district that relies on fundraising.
Right, but
Just
we
to make-
haven't talked to the teachers or the principals yet on
But
this.
it shouldn't matter, it's really targeting those who are not their own fiscal agent.
Right.
Like if a booster club is its own fiscal agent, they
Correct.
can do whatever they want for any crowd surfing or whatnot, because it
Right.
needs to come through them.
Right,
And it wouldn't be a Concord School District sanctioned fundraiser, it would be for that
Right.
event.
And I do think that because we're kind of wading into new territory, that we're probably going to have to include in this what it is and what it is not.
Yeah.
Because just like with the rental facility policy, where we did our best, but it generated a lot of questions. So we just need to be, in my opinion, thorough about what this is and what this is not.
Right.
And then, in terms of the dollar limits, I first thought is looking at this, we've got approval procedures, we have approval criteria, we have monetary limits. This is going to add labor for teachers who are looking for maybe even just a quick couple $100s to, boost their classroom wiggle seats
Yeah,
or
what if they
whatever.
thought, what if their goal was to raise 500 and somebody made a $2,000, would they have to close it down, or would just?
well, they would have to just reach out and follow the policy,
Yeah.
which would mean come to
Yeah.
me and just let me know.
I started this little, now
Yeah,
it's
right,
huge, here we
right.
go, got it, got it.
Here's the
Yeah.
other thing to think about though, too. We sometimes hear about, from people, I pay all this money, I pay all these taxes, and yet they're asking me for more donations. What is that about? So we wanna be careful.
Mm-hmm.
And you do, you ask a lot of your community to fund public school. I get it, I understand it. And so you wanna make sure that these aren't things that we should be funding, right? But because somebody didn't order it or didn't, there might be a reason for it. I don't know what that reason might be, but it does happen. I wanna be careful that the district doesn't look, like we're not taking care of the needs of our kids in terms of their education.
Right.
Something to think about,
Yeah.
and
I-
something for teachers to think about.
Right, and we sort of briefly touched on this, which is that we're not gonna bring up any individual person, school, and
No.
in this discussion, we're just talking about generally.
Right.
But I will give, a couple of examples in my own experience of a parent of an elementary school kid coming from a different district and assuming that we were going to have to supply the list of classroom supplies, only to find out that each teacher has a budget for that classroom, which is amazing. It comes through the district, and so it was so nice as a parent to see the school funding the things that the teachers needed. That's great. That's great for PR. And then on the flip side, I have communications from a teacher who puts their Amazon wish list in their signature. So each and every time they are communicating with somebody, they're making an ask, and it doesn't feel discreet. It doesn't, not discreet like under the radar, but just like a program that they need something for, and then once it's fulfilled, it's fulfilled. It's sort of just this ongoing wish list. So for me, that's sort of like two sides of a
It's the
coin,
whole,
where we're like, okay, the district is providing, and it's a great impression on a parent, and then there's the flip side where I'm like, well, is this teacher just never getting what they need?
Or does this teacher just want a lot of stuff?
Or does the teacher want a lot of stuff?
Yeah,
So,
right,
in
which is
terms
bad,
of like,
but-
I agree with you, like how we communicate what we are asking for does matter.
Yeah.
And I think that we'll have to cover that in this
And that-
policy as well.
And that's why we wanted to start to talk about it, again, I think these days, everyone has budgets and money under the microscope, and it's important that we, and the board's been very clear, right? It's about equity. You can't expect one parent to be able to go down and buy all these nice things to start school, and not everybody's in that same position. So the district has always been very careful about making sure that all kids get the basic supply, right? They can be functional. Now, yeah, we might ask for extra boxes of Kleenex, or maybe some, hand solutions or wipes or whatever, but even then, we're being careful, as you know. Matt's very careful about what comes into our district via, products, so, it's just kind of tightening it up a little bit.
Yeah. And, we have the added issue of scams. Everything looks a little suspicious lately, even when things are legitimate.
Right.
It's become common practice to second guess. So maybe this actually provides, parents and teachers reassurances that something is a legitimate fundraiser because they can check a list of approved sites, or they can,
Right.
check with the district. Depending on how this lands, but I think it's all good.
I wonder too, could you potentially, if you're worried about too much, limit the amount per year? So, not the amount, but the number of requests. In other words,
Yeah, that's overwhelming when
I
it's in
know.
a signature.
yeah, that's
Right, and I don't fault that person. That person probably said it and forget it.
Yeah.
Like they probably were like, oh, that's the beginning of the year. Maybe this will, boost my, classroom supplies, and then just forgot that it was there for the rest of the year. So, that's another point, is cleaning that up.
Yeah.
I heard a story of another teacher who had set a project on one of the the classroom funding sites, and then like a full year later, it randomly got funded. Did that teacher even need those materials at that point?
Right.
But they, sort of set it up and let it go, and so there are many considerations around crowdfunding. So I'm so glad that it's coming to the table. I'm very interested in feedback from teachers and administrators before we even get into the
Right,
content.
but what we wanted this conversation first, before we jumped into, all of a sudden, we telling teachers, well, we're gonna do something about this crowdfunding.
Yeah.
And I think it just gives us, the protocols that we need to have in place. And I always say, things like this is not just about setting up rules and regulations, but it also protects them. Part of the job of the
Right.
policies that you
Right.
write, we just finished that 414. It isn't just about the complainant, it's about, it's
All of it.
protecting
Yeah.
everyone. So I feel like this protects them too.
Well, and knowing that there's a policy in place, it's gonna make staff members that might look into, crowdfunding be more careful, because they realize, what do I have to follow? Okay.
What
Well, maybe
site
I'm
am
not
I
gonna pick
using?
this site.
Right.
Right, right.
And if somebody contributes, and when they
Yeah.
put their information in, does that company then take that information and use it in another way?
Right.
You know, there's all that kind
Yeah.
of, that we've certainly become accustomed to, right? So we wanna make sure that we're protecting those people who make those kinds of donations.
I hear that. And then I also, you know, again, this is placing obstacles to
I know.
teachers potentially just going out and getting what they need
Yeah.
because they didn't get it from us in the first place, right? And they're gonna be like, great, now I have to get it approved, it's gotta be from a site I don't wanna use, and now I have to
Put a report into
I
the
have to
superintendent.
report to the superintendent how my donations were used and how the students benefited.
Maybe we don't, maybe we can calm that down a little bit. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
we can, you know, people have used the superintendent, maybe it's a principal's thing. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
they just work with their principal in terms of doing it. But we got it, I feel very,
No,
I
there
feel
needs
we
to be
have
some oversight, I would agree.
Yeah.
to the
Checks and
principals, we need to
balances.
support them. I'm not against this, I think it's wonderful that people have an opportunity to get
Well,
more things for the kids.
Year after year, as our new teachers come in, they're much more technically savvy than we are, you know,
Right.
so, and everything changes in a blink of an eye, so, you know, in 5 years, it could be a whole different host of issues, and this keeps everything
Right.
looked at.
And I think, actually, to bring up something you and I had talked about before, which is the opportunity to keep it local,
Right.
right? There's this default to Amazon for a book that you could maybe get at this, basically the same price at Gibson's. So there's an opportunity here to support local by having a policy in place that directs people to local vendors, that helps them remember that
And I
Amazon
love
may
that.
feel convenient in the moment, but oftentimes there's an upcharge and it's not cheaper than.
It's a great example. 'cause
Millions
they
of invisible
often have
dollars
that.
go away.
You
every
can
day.
do just as well
Yeah.
downtown at Gibson's,
Right.
Yeah.
so.
All right, well, thank you for bringing this forward. Does anybody have any more comments or questions on the policy itself? Do you guys want to walk through it?
Yeah, we could walk through it. It's pretty simple, and, you know, the purpose, there's a purpose statement on it, you know, just to tell you why what was the point of even bringing this up, and like you say, I don't wanna add another barrier to the teachers, but it reviews that, so take a peek at that, maybe mark it up in any way. The second part is really kinda, and it starts out negative, I'm not sure I like the where it falls into the policy, but it's unapproved crowdfunding, so it kinda gives you an idea of what you have to do.
To be approved.
To be approved.
So maybe process for crowdfunding approval.
Yeah.
Sounds better than
Yeah,
unapproved.
than unapproved.
It's prohibited.
So, yeah,
Okay.
so I mean, we might wanna word that up
Yeah.
a little bit. And it just also, to people have to understand, there's no compelling reason for you to do this. You don't have to donate, you don't have to do anything, either parents or students or other teachers don't have to feel like they have to contribute. And, you know, so your name is on some list, so, I think we wanna make that clear.
Yeah.
And then basically, we just asked for, we asked for 5 or 6 statements here on how to get the request and what you need to do to end your request.
Yeah.
What kinds of information do you need? Your name, what site you'll be using, what is it you're doing? That's all. What do you wanna do?
Right.
And when it begins and when it ends, so there was a beginning and an end to it, rather than have it just running one. And, you know, we'll probably have a form, you know, we'll create a form for it so that they don't have to create their own.
This is good conversation starter, and then a good policy will come out of the
Yeah,
conversation,
and
is what I
that's
think.
kind of what we wanted to do today. And then we wanted a list of all the approved sites. What would approve? What do we know works and is legit and has good results? So we would want to give the teachers a list of sites that we think would be appropriate. And then the process for the gifts and accepting it, working, really, they should work with their superintendent. But it's over, we did it by amount of money. I think we put it in there, didn't we, Karen? Yeah,
What- yeah,
$500
yeah.
under the principal, and
Yeah.
if it got
to
higher than that,
25.
it went to the superintendent at 2,500. And I don't really know, Jack might know what, and Ellen may know what the limits are, and how much money is really, like you said, Cara, it might be just a couple $100 for one particular thing.
Is this a campaign that seeks dollars, or does it, this includes
Well,
dollar
it
amount
could,
means
it
items?
It could be both,
Up
it could
to.
be items
value.
Okay.
or dollars.
Well, I just look at some of the, I know the thrift shop does a lot of this. And there's a site and you click on what you're willing to either buy, or you can make a monetary donation, and they'll use the money to purchase on their own. So, sometimes, people donate items and you have, 50 boxes of, pads that no one's using and no tampons left. So the Red Dot Project can take the money and go buy what they need. So some of these are both. You can purchase an actual item, or you can donate money for the organization to purchase the item. So that's crowdfunding. And it's not consistent. They set it up and then it ends. When they get what they need, they take it down. So like in looking at this policy, they already follow it. But she doesn't have to let you know, well, I bought 36 boxes of tampons last month. You know what I mean? Like, that's where I can see where, like, do I have to keep track of all this? Which they probably do to a certain
They
extent
do anyway.
Yeah.
They do, yeah.
So a lot of this just puts in place so when someone new comes into the district, I think, and they're
Just so
starting
they
out.
know. So, and we might think about $500 doesn't go very far anymore, does it?
Yeah, I was gonna say that's
So
a
maybe
small
that number is too low, so I wanna get some numbers from Jack, before we finalize. This thing costs $2,500 here. But don't forget now, anything over that money would come to the board, and you often, as you know, approve donations.
Yeah.
And you have a responsibility that if anything over a threshold, a certain threshold, this one says 20,000. I wanna double check our policy, but you have to have a hearing on an acceptance. You have to have a hearing when it goes over a certain amount.
Cause I
think it
put
is
$2,000
is it
donation.
20?
The Molly B Foundation put 20,000 into the new sound equipment at the theater, and it came before, we had to vote on it.
Right.
We had to talk
So
about it.
you have you actually open it up and there's a hearing, people get a chance to respond, you talk about what the project is. And
Yeah,
so
close came.
with anything over 20,000. So there is a process, now we haven't had anything like that kind of amount of money. The next section just laid out, and again, all of the criteria for approval. I think I mentioned a couple of things, it had to be in line with the district curriculum, that there's not disparities between students and schools. Again, that's important, right, in our district, it's as we go from place to place. Again, a beginning and an end date, no comparisons between buildings. We have to be careful about when you post information, this is really important. When you post information, that you don't put information that would violate confidentiality, FERPA information, student's name, age, address, that kind of thing. That's I forget which number that is, but
580.
yeah, on page 4, number 9, pictures are another area that you have to be careful of, so. 13, we're gonna have to talk to the wellness committee, does not request food or beverage items inconsistent with the district policy, so we can't ask for
cupcakes.
5 dozen cupcakes, because there's
We're gonna be
somebody's
in
birthday.
so much trouble, you guys.
I know, that's still, it's interesting discussion we always have, and we're gonna come to you with that policy.
Yeah, that's really challenging.
Yeah.
Because there's no list of foods that are acceptable or not acceptable.
And-
It's
and
using
I-
foods in celebration.
Yeah.
But, okay, all right,
It's
I have other things.
probably some making donations of money to purchase a pizza party or something, maybe, or something like that. But again, I think that would be more monetary.
Right, but then there was that caveat that we've been discussing in the wellness, that if families bring in the food, that's what we're discouraging, like birthday celebrations,
right.
right? But if the staff, if the teacher has a planned day that incorporates some educational component and they are the ones purchasing it, that was considered to be
Okay.
okay.
Right, like maybe they're having a pizza party because they're learning about Italy.
Yeah.
So the teacher's looking for donations for a pizza party to
Right.
celebrate Italian history or
Yeah.
something.
But then it, this gets really shady, because then there's the movie day asking for donations for liter sodas and other chips and whatnot, right? Then that's starting to get.
What happened to popcorn?
I should say popcorn and water.
What happened?
I'm not, I definitely don't disagree. This gets to be very challenging.
Yes, I know, I've been on wellness committees, it's tricky.
So the last piece of it really has to do with more about how we regulate the money. That's the other part, and all monetary donations made payable to and deposited into account designated by the SAU business office, so that we know where it is. And again, it's
As a district that had the lunch lady embezzle $500,000 a bunch of years back, this is a good thing to keep track of.
yeah.
Here?
And remember, when donations are made,
That's
when
crazy.
the PTA builds a playground equipment and puts in a new swing, they don't own that anymore. That's yours. So that anything like that becomes the school district property. So if a teacher says, I want to buy 5, I want to buy 10 sets of ear pods. We have those, but let me use that as an example. That becomes our property.
Who's gonna track that?
I understand that, but
Right.
it isn't.
I mean, I also,
Yeah.
I understand too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which brings me to my other question about tracking activity. So if I'm a teacher and I just don't want to do this process, and I put something up on givememoney.com/scammers alert, and what are the ramifications? What is
Professional expectations.
Okay.
431. We have
Karen was
policy.
ready.
I'm ready.
So I feel like we
Bring it
should
on.
have that
Yeah.
cited
Yeah,
in this
okay.
policy.
Right.
We need
Conform
to
with
point
district
to
policies, yeah.
what matters of personnel will come up if there's inconsistent adherence. You know, there's definitely going to be a difference between a teacher who does their best and just misses the mark, and somebody who's like, no, I'm just going to put something up on Amazon because it's my personal Amazon wish list. It's my wish list. It's none of your business.
Or not, or who gives a letter home that says, please send in donations, then there's no way it could be tracked.
So yeah, there's a lot to think
Yeah,
about here.
there is a lot to think about, and again, we're not trying to handcuff people to do the work that they want to do with children. That's the last thing we want to do, right? But we also just want to be able to handle it and control it in this day and age, and people expect it of us.
Yep,
But
I agree.
The staff could send a letter home saying, this is what I'm looking for. You can access it on these websites like Amazon, but then that would be okay. I would say that circumvents this policy, because this is about crowdfunding for online.
And they're not doing it
They're not
directly
doing it
like that,
online.
right?
Right.
If you send me a list, then I could
Yeah.
I could buy it and send it in with my child,
Yeah,
and then it doesn't.
right. There's no question about it. There's ways around everything, right? But I think at least it would help us to begin to bring this. I think we have some work to do on this, a lot of work to do on this, but, Ellen and Jack had a first run-through with it, so I need to get back to them too, along with the teachers.
I think it's a great
Principals,
start.
I'll bring
I
this
mean,
to the principals first.
The only way we can have a conversation about it is to generate something
Right.
and say, what do you think?
Right.
You know, I don't think it's a bad thing at all to have a potentially tense conversation around money.
Yeah.
It just is
Right.
a tough thing to talk about. And so, you know, I
Like
think
said,
I
it comes up now with-
anticipate pushback.
It comes up with boosters. That's
Yeah.
where we worry the most. And who's running the booster clubs, right? You know, when a teacher's running the booster clubs, and that happens, you know, because they're just like their moms and dads, right? Their kids are in a sport, and they're gonna support them, right? You know, and now they've got, you know, all this money is flowing through with events, and, you know, and now all of a
Money
sudden
gets
they're
mixed up.
responsible for it, and we need to make sure that they're supported and, you know, protected. I do worry about them.
Have you thought about Venmo and how that may apply here?
Well, people are starting to use Venmo now. They're using it a
Yeah,
lot.
all the time.
Cheddar
Yeah.
Up, well, Cheddar Up, the same thing, any of those.
Yeah, so we're gonna have to address how the payments are made, because then you don't see anything.
But to be
We're
clear,
not talking, you know, there's no logos, there's, you know,
we
sorry,
can
go ahead.
circumvent, someone could just circumvent this whole thing and be more fiscally responsible themselves to become a 501c3.
Right.
Any of the booster clubs could become a
We
501c3.
used to have to.
They are.
All the
They-
booster
they-
clubs are
So then
501c3.
They are.
that really shouldn't matter because they have to report that out, just like a PTO.
Right. Yeah, I think this is more,
Yeah, we've actually found some that had not done that, so we.
Yeah, so
we
I think
cleaned
that would
up
be
a
the-
little bit. Yeah.
That's,
Yeah, that was a
they,
nice-
they need to secure themselves. Are you concerned about having a Concord school district logo anywhere associated with someone who's accepting money?
right.
So they shouldn't be I mean, I look at that, they shouldn't be using.
They should they should not be using our branding
Correct.
when they do that kind of work.
And that, yeah, exactly, that's how I see it. If someone if a booster club, I'm just using that as an example, wants to not be a 501c3 and they wanna get mixed up with people's money coming in and I don't have any way of tracking that, and then someone wants to sue me, that's on them. But we're concerned about having the Concord School District associated with them in any way. So then I somehow see that as a little different, not managing their, like, this doesn't apply to a 501c3.
No. This is your classroom teacher that.
Right,
Just
okay.
reaching out and seeking, you know, donations, whether they're actual items or whether it's money.
Right, or any staff member who has
It's not the.
a
groups
club
that-
or
yeah.
is looking donations for
Right.
clubs,
Right.
okay.
Are boosters always sports related?
Primarily.
Well, I think the music department
Yeah,
has. a
Friends of
big-
Performing
Music
arts.
also has
friend-
booster,
yeah.
okay.
I don't think they call it a booster club,
Yeah.
but, yeah.
Same, it's the same
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
framework,
Concept,
yeah.
yeah, same concept.
All right, I'll think about that.
Well, so would be the robotics too.
Robotics,
They have
don't-
Concord, the
Yeah.
Concord
Yeah,
Robotics
Molly V
supports
supported
them.
that for a few years,
And they're their own 501c3.
yes.
Robotics, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
under Concord Robotics, my understanding is Concord Robotics supports the robotics teams.
Okay.
Okay. All good things to think about for when we
Yeah,
get
we'll
feedback
come
and this
back
comes
and
back
come
to
back
us.
to you
We'll-
with
we'll-
some more and clean it up.
Workshop
and-
it, yeah.
Yeah, I do. I think this is the kind of policy that we need to do that, because it affects across the board,
Mhm.
right? So.
Great, thank you
Anyway,
for bringing it
thank you,
forward,
yeah.
thank you for drafting the language.
Yeah, this is good.
So I have you scheduled for June 11th for your next meeting.
Okay.
Is there anything in particular, I know we're gonna bring back 415.
Yep, we'll see. what
I don't know where we'll be with this, but I'll get back to you on the crowdfunding. Is there anything else that you want to bring? I mean, we're kind of waiting in anticipation of what's gonna happen down at the legislative office.
I think it's, given how thick 415 is, why not give us a shorter meeting?
Okay.
For once.
All right.
Why don't we just have that?
And it's a busy time anyway.
Yeah.
That week is graduation week. There's things going on. The Wall of Fame is gonna have an evening. We have a lot of things going on.
Okay.
And
So I would say.
And you know, I like to get to some of those things.
Yes, I will put it out to committee members, though. Are there any policies that you've been thinking about, have questions about, that you would like to generate a discussion? Even not now, I would just send it over.
Can I just think about that?
Yeah, I would say, think about it.
I am gonna bring back the wellness, because the Wellness Committee has
Thank you.
asked me to look at a policy, some change in policy.
Thank
So
you.
I have it, but I just haven't
That's fine.
got to it.
It's good for it to be on the list, because we
Yeah.
also know that the facility rental
Yeah,
might
we've been
come back
working
to
with
us.
that,
Okay.
yeah, might come back to us. I worked with athletic director, and certainly, Matt and, what's her name, at the high school? Glenna, thank you. Glenna, who does a lot of that.
Yeah.
So we need to take a peek at that again too.
All right. Well, those don't have to go on the agenda, but
Nope.
if for any reason they come up and you're ready to have us look at it, we can always add it to the agenda, and if we get to it, we get to it. And then I would say probably June or July, we'll just start reviewing what the legislature has
Has dictated we review.
produced and, kind of make a plan for the upcoming
Yep.
year.
And Superintendent, I know you had July 9th as a July meeting date. I can't make that meeting.
Yeah,
Neither.
we're looking at everybody's vacation schedules, so
Well, we were supposed
we
to
have an
send those.
executive
Yeah.
committee,
Yeah.
so we'll kind of, I know that that was kind of a rough, his July. And, I haven't even filled anything in yet. so.
Okay.
Tentative.
that, yeah.
I forgot we had to send
Yeah.
that to.
I mean, we try to give some people some time too, just, people go away on vacation and stuff, so. And Karen doesn't work in the summer.
Right. Good.
Good
Good for
girl.
you, girl.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, unless there's anything else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
It is 7:34. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. That was great.